Many Americans have seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life. Each Christmas, people watch, once again, as Jimmy Stewart desperately tries to keep his bank from failing. For most Americans born since World War II, this fictional story is their only experience with bank failures. For their grandparents, however, it was a very different story. During the Great Depression, thousands of banks closed and millions of Americans were affected. The failure of so many American banks is a well-known chapter in the story of the Great Depression. Yet even now, 85 years later, the numbers are still staggering. About 9,000 banks closed in the 1930s, the vast majority between 1930 and 1933. In just one year, 1933, 4,000 banks failed in this country. By the end of 1933, depositors had lost approximately $140 billion in bank closings. The Midwest was particularly hard hit. Missouri alone experienced about 450 bank failures from 1929 to 1933. Until 1930, St. Charles County had never had a bank fail. However, by the time the numerous banking panics ended in 1933, at least 12 communities in the county had witnessed bank failures. 9 of those closings occurred in 1931, including the Central Trust Bank of St. Charles, People's Bank of St. Charles, Bank of Portage-la-Sioux, Bank of Flint Hill, and the Bank of Wentzville. 4 of the banks were located in Boone-Doodle country. From Thursday, December 24th through Wednesday, December 30, 1931, during what the St. Charles Banner News called the low point of the Depression in the area, the banks in Hamburg, New Melle, Defiance, and Augusta closed their doors for the last time. These 4 closings in 7 days were an example of a contagion, a phenomenon in which several banks in close proximity close at the same time. This was not uncommon during the Depression. The contagion, a kind of hysteria, worked like this. The depositors of Bank A hear rumors of their bank's demise and go to the bank and demand their money. Bank A does not have enough cash on hand to satisfy all its depositors. Because bank assets are mostly loans and securities, these assets then had to be liquidated quickly by Bank A to meet its obligations to its depositors. Other banks in the area, cash-strapped themselves, are loath to pay fair market value, so Bank A sells its assets at a loss and the bank is closed. The contagion spreads when the customers of Banks B and C in nearby communities hear of the Bank A failure and run their bank, demanding cash for their deposits. This may have happened in southern St. Charles County the last week of 1931. The first area institution to close was the Bank of Defiance, founded in 1907 by Dr. Frank Nichols. Its board of directors included Judge R.E.L. Fulkerson, L.L. Fulkerson, and I.M. McCormick. Its closure on Thursday, December 24th, must have diminished the enthusiasm of Christmas celebrations the next day. The directors told a local newspaper reporter that the bank was believed to be able to pay everything in full and that its last financial statement was excellent, but it had been closed because of continuous withdrawal of funds. The bank never reopened. By the beginning of the next week, residents of Hamburg and Augusta knew of the Defiance closing, and the runs on the banks in those communities began. By December 29th, the damage was done. The Farmers Bank of Hamburg closed during the morning. Its president, Theodore Seib, posted a sign on the bank door stating the bank was being closed due to constant withdrawals, although the notice sent to the State Finance Department did not give a reason for closing the bank, which never reopened. It would be only a few hours later when the Bank of Augusta closed. By noon, its doors were shut for the final time by its board of directors, J.D. Meyer, Phil C. Reich, Edward F. Hafferkamp, and August F. Lutkmeyer. A few days later, the local Hamburg correspondent for the St. Charles Banner News wrote, "The Farmers Bank of Hamburg, Missouri closed its doors this morning, December 29th, on account of too many withdrawals and to protect depositors. It will help us to sympathize and have a warmer heart for those that have been placed in our circumstances." It would take less than 24 hours for another nearby town to be placed in those circumstances. The Bank of New Melle closed December 30th, in spite of the fact that the bank, according to its board of directors, had been in good shape until a scare was created by the closing of 2 neighboring banks. A.C. Hefner, John Cunningham, and Edwin Wessler dealt with the run on their bank for 2 days before closing its doors for the final time, stating, The institution was closed to save the depositors. For a period of several days, optimism existed for the eventual reopening of these 4 banks in a short time. In early January, Edwin Wessler of the New Melly Bank stated, "We are thinking of reopening but cannot say for sure until our books have been examined," and bank officials from Augusta and Hamburg expressed similar hopes to newspaper reporters. All these communities felt the necessity of a bank very keenly. It is almost impossible to transact business with a feeling of safety unless a depository is handy. However, by January 6th, it was clear the banks in Defiance and Hamburg would stay closed. Folks in Augusta held on to hope for a bit longer, but their hopes died when the state finance department examiners decided against their bank. On January 9, a local newspaper headline read, "New Melly Bank to start new bank without delay," but nothing happened. E.F. Ortelheid, a former cashier of Farmers Bank of Hamburg, was appointed as liquidator of the Hamburg, Defiance, and Augusta banks. Webster Carenbrock liquidated the assets of the New Melly Bank. The St. Charles Banner News reported that these small banks in Defiance, Hamburg, Augusta, and New Melly could cope with the ordinary fluctuations of these rather perilous times, but they could not cope with fear in the hearts of the people that impelled them to withdraw out their funds. Many people were ruined by bank failures like those that struck Boone country during the last week of 1931. Just over a year later, President Franklin Roosevelt declared a bank holiday, and new banking legislation was created, including the FDIC, which provides insurance for every bank depositor. However, in 1931, no such protections existed, and Hamburg, Defiance, New Melly, and Augusta, and other small towns across America suffered.